I've been shoveling snow, it feels like, for days. It just keeps coming. But we need it, right? We need it. Okay. There's been a couple of things I want to bring up here that I just feel like need to be, I guess, solidified. So I referenced a video with Troy Abels and Hannah Stoddard and Jared with Christian Homestead. And they talked about Leonard Arrington and particularly Hannah. And they've written books, the family's written books, she's written books about how Leonard Arrington, as a church historian, really tried to change church history. And one aspect of that was the seer stone, right? And we talked about that. Now, I just, for some reason, I get the feeling that I didn't make myself very clear on this. So I just want to talk a little bit about that. I want to finish up with just the first chapter of John, which is just an amazing chapter. All of it is, but it's so good. Okay, I'm going to read a comment by someone. I won't reveal who, but it says, I understand that God doesn't micromanage everything on earth, and that's good. My concern is, why did the church leaders send Leonard Arrington to BYU, where he continued to promote his false ideas to our young people? The man should have been excommunicated, in my opinion. No wonder we have problems with the church universities, and I just don't understand why it's allowed to continue. None of my children dare send their children to any college, including BYU. Okay, so this is the interesting question. Now, if you go on the church website, and I've mentioned this, you will just look up seer stone. They'll have a photo of the seer stone that's held by the First Presidency. I've talked about this. And they'll have a short video explaining how that Joseph used the seer stone. So you can blame Leonard Arrington, you can blame others, but the fact is, it's still it's still promoted on the church website. Now, look, I'm not going to take a position on it. I frankly don't know. It doesn't bother me. The seer stone doesn't bother me at all. So I'm not going to take that side, but I'm not going to discount it either. Here is the issue. There are many still within the church that feel very strongly about these type of things. So for people like Hannah Stoddard and others to go, shame on Leonard Arrington and other scholars for doing what they did without, okay, you can say that, shame on them, and show your evidence, that's wonderful. But you can't, in my opinion, just stop there, because it's continuing to be taught. It's continuing to, so then you have to say, well, what's going on with the church? And that conversation doesn't continue for some reason. I don't understand that. So personally, I would like to hear that argument of why would it still be on the church website and being promoted. Granted, Leonard Arrington. Now, here's another issue I have with not so much Hannah Stoddard, but you take Rod Meldrum, you take Jonathan Neville, which I've had a couple of meetings with Jonathan Neville. I won't say why we ran across each other, but we were able to to visit. And I have a difference of opinion on a lot of things than him. Now, he wrote a book about Benjamin Winchester, who was an early church member in the latter days. And he said, basically that he hijacked the time and seasons to put in the narrative of the Mesoamerican place where the Book of Mormon took place in Mesoamerica. And again, another person changing history, and that really it should be the heartland or the Great Lakes and that kind of thing. And I totally disagree with that, but that's fine. It's not a big deal. You can go on the church website, and you can see the church does not take a position as to the geography of the Book of Mormon. And they actually give both evidences of both the heartland and Mesoamerican. So I think they did that on purpose. They took the letter that Joseph wrote to Emma about him looking in Missouri and looking out on the plains of the Nephites. And then they also took Times and Seasons articles where Joseph said that the things being uncovered in Mexico, Guatemala, and those areas are evidences of the Book of Mormon. So, but they said, this is more of a book of a spiritual nature, discovering how it points to Christ and the story. And it's not going to be, at least for the time being, thought of in an archaeological way or a geography way, improving the Book of Mormon or identifying where it took place, at least for the time being. I'm looking forward to that. Now, I've traveled both places. I've been to both places. I've seen things. I've traveled more to Mesoamerican than I have, but I've been to Keokuk, Iowa. I think that's how you say that, where the Heartlanders say Zarahemla would be. I've been to places in Ohio, in Missouri. I've been to mounds. I've seen the some mounds, but again, not extensively. But I've looked at it, and I've read the books. I've weighed it out. And so I'm a Mesoamerican guy, and I haven't been bashful about that. But here's the problem with I had a phone call one time, and I've mentioned this, but from somebody from Rod Meldrum's group, and they said, hey, we'd like you to, we noticed you have a YouTube channel, you have a lot of, you have X amount of followers or subscribers. We'd like to have you come to our thing that they do right around conference time. They have a conference. And I said, well, I don't think you'd want me because I'm not a Heartlander. And they just cut me off. They don't want to hear any opposing view because they think this is evil, that it also causes faith crises, a faith crisis in people, and that it was generated from BYU. Right along the lines of Leonard Arrington. So I offend people on both sides. I know that half of the people, I might even lose some subscribers of just saying that I'm a total Mesoamerican guy. I've weighed it out, and I don't think there's that the Heartland is even close to being. If you really study the Book of Mormon, I just don't see it. I don't see it taking place there. I know the argument. I know the argument about the Heartland better than a lot of people that believe in the Heartland know the arguments. So I'm very familiar with most of it. I have noticed that the Heartlanders are expanding it to make things fit a little bit better. And I know the seas are the Great Lakes, the east and north, and the east and west and south and north sea. They're the Great Lakes. I know the narrow neck of land is between two of the Great Lakes or thereabouts, and that the land of first inheritance is down in Florida, and then they migrated up. Yeah, so I kind of know what they're saying. The biggest thing that they push is DNA. That's one. And then the other is more of the prophecies about the promised land, and that nowhere other than the United States fits that. My argument to that is there were no borders back then. So where do you say the United States begins and the other ends, right? At the time of Joseph Smith, Utah was Mexican territory. So, there's a lot of things, and I don't want to get into that right now on this. My point being is that I can argue both sides, but I can also offend both sides. You know me, I've been critical of BYU and what's going on down there, even prior to Greg Mattson and Quick Media coming on. He pinpoints things better than I did, but I was questioning, the things way before. So I have issues with what's going on at BYU. You guys know that. But I also think there were some wonderful scholars at BYU that really studied out geography of the Book of Mormon and brought forth some great evidence out of there. But not only that, traveling to those places and that. So that's what makes it a little uncomfortable for someone like me, because I don't side. I get ignored by the Heartlanders, which then includes people like Hannah Stoddard and others, because I don't go along with the geography of the Book of Mormon like they do. And so then you get blackballed by them. On the other hand, I totally can't stand the intellectuals and others, Bushman and Gibbons. I lump them in there. I've talked about these individuals that I think, Osler, who has a book in Deseret Book on the alphabet soup people and how that's all just wonderful and great. And I come to odds on both sides. Okay. Now, I think what we have to realize that's just so obvious is that there's leadership. Now, I don't know on what level. I wouldn't even predict, but you'd have to say that there is leadership that is very, very supportive of what's going on at BYU, with liberal professors, leftist professors, with this change of history in the church. And Leonard Arrington, there was obviously support for him from leadership. BYU doesn't live in a bubble and it isn't exempt. Deseret Book isn't exempt from the influences of the leadership of the church. So you have to come to the conclusion that there is some element of leadership in the church that is very supportive of what kind of books are going in Deseret Book, what's being taught at BYU, and how certain historical things have been changed or emphasized. And then once you do that, it's okay. That's where I'm at. I'm like, and I've been saying this for quite some time on a lot of issues. If you're going to have the Washington, D.C. temple grounds, the temple square, if you will, Washington, D.C. temple, and in the visitor center, you're going to invite the Gay Men's Choir of Washington, D.C. and promote it, you have to know that there's some leadership, some level of leadership that's like, this is awesome. I love this. And a lot of us are going, what? This doesn't feel right. It doesn't seem right. This is why, in my opinion, we have to have the constant influence of the Holy Ghost in our lives. We have to. And we have to decide. And it could be this that we have to decide. It could be any number of things that really don't have to do with the gospel and the doctrine of Christ. And I've talked about what those are. They're spelled out in Scripture so well. If we focus on the gospel and the doctrine of Christ, as spelled out in the standard words, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay, and we're going to stay in the good ship Zion. We're going to make and keep covenants, and we're going to be fine. But if we get out in the tall grass, or the long grass, as they call it in Africa, death in the long grass. If we get out in there, we're going to get torn in pieces because a lot of things just aren't going to make sense. Now, look, I go through it just like you go through it, and I question and I wonder, and then I get back to the Scriptures, I get back to the Book of Mormon, I get back to the temple, and I'm like, you know what? There's obviously some people that think different than I do that are in leadership of the church, and I'm fine with that. I don't really care. Oh, that's not true. That's a false statement. I do care, but I'm not going to let it affect my relationship with Christ and my covenants that I've made to Him in and through the temple. And I'm not going to let that affect that. And I'm going to continue to study the Word. And I cannot deny my testimony of the Book of Mormon, as well as the Bible, the Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price. I have a witness of those, of being canonized, truthful word, the Word of God. And so this other stuff is just that, and it's a test. It's a test. It's a test. And we need to be up for it, and not get driven off course because of this. But we cannot deny that there's something going on and just go, oh, Leonard Arrington, put all the blame on him when it's still taught. Okay, now, some YouTubers, some people take the approach that anything that comes out of a general authority's mouth, anything that's been printed by the church, anything that comes forth in the church newsroom, in manuals, anything that is on the church website, that is from God, revelation from from Jesus Christ to the first presidency, to the quorum of the 12, and then distributed out to the little people. That it's literally Moses coming down with the tablets. That's how a lot of people feel, and that's what they teach. So that's the source they go to, and if it's in there and on there, then that's what they go with. Well, they're going to have troubles. They're going to have issues, and the seer stone is a perfect example of that, because you can sit and criticize Leonard Arrington. You can sit and criticize looking into a hat and a stone and saying that is false history, and that the real way he did it was with the Urim and Thummim by the gift and power of God, and that's it. You can say that, but then you cannot say that everything that comes from the church is okay then. And then you have to go, well, how, what's the vetting process? How does all this work? Good luck in finding that out. But there are individuals who have, this is my opinion, that are in leadership. Now, having served as a mission president in the Salt Lake City West Mission, being really in the bubble, and like I say, I've said this before, on any given weekend, we might be invited to 6 different stake conferences during our 3-year time there, to speak or to share a testimony. General authorities virtually every week, and every one of them had a different topic and a different, or not, I shouldn't say a different topic, had different advice, of how you should do it, how you should do things. And so I do think that I have a little bit of an edge on this type of thing because I've seen it, I lived it. And I know that there are huge influences and in leadership, and they're on a committee, and then they try to push a certain agenda, and then it actually goes up, so it starts in a committee here, and then it goes to here, and then find your favorite apostle that will listen to this, and it goes here, and then it goes to the first presidency, and then they'll approve it, or they'll just say no, not now, not yet. Now, not every single thing goes that route. So I suspect there's many things that never make it to the Quorum of the 12 or the First Presidency that are okayed, or that are put in on the church website, or they're this or that. That's my opinion. I don't know that for a fact. But I suspect there's a lot of things that there's trust. There's trust that what you're going to do is in line with the gospel. A bishop on a ward level would do the same thing. He's not going to know what's being taught in every class. He might hear about it, but if it's just stuff and it might not be true, but it's the person's trying their best and they're faithful and they come and they interpreted it wrong, or they just didn't have the right understanding and teach it, what you're going to say, well, the bishop approved it. They called that teacher, they set him apart, and so the bishop approved it, and everything they say is proof. I mean, I've been in testimony meetings, or just regular sacrament meetings where you hear stuff and you go, ooh, but that's the humanity of the church, which I love. People have their opinions. People have the thing. Well, it doesn't matter if you do it on a ward level, stake level, big church level. For some reason, we have this idea that if someone is a full-time general authority, that all of a sudden everything they say and do is from God, direct. And I just think that's dangerous. I think that's dangerous. And I think that, otherwise, why have the Holy Ghost? Why study things? Just wait for them to come down off the mountain and tell us little people, what to do and how to do it. Now, when it comes to priesthood keys and authority and the proper way of things, of ordinations, setting apart, covenant, temple things, absolutely, we have to have an established authority, keys, and I totally believe that. I've seen it, I've felt it, I've been involved in those keys before, and I know how that works. But as far as the keys receiving inspiration and knowledge and understanding for somebody else, I don't think that's the purpose of a prophet, is to make sure that everything that comes out of a distribution of information of so many sources, that it's the prophet's responsibility to make sure everything is the will of the Father in those things. And this is why we struggle with this stuff. So that's my clarification on it. I probably butchered and made it worse. Okay, totally changing subjects. For some reason, I have felt, well, let me tell you an experience I had on my mission. I was in Gander, Newfoundland, and my companion and I was a senior companion. And the area was really interesting. Closest missionaries, I think it was Thompson Falls, but I won't swear to that because I think that's a place in Montana, but something Falls, Newfoundland. Not Tom, I can't remember. I'd have to look on a map because I know the direction, but something Falls, Newfoundland, that was the closest companionship. And they're a couple of 100 miles away probably. But anyway, the first time I got transferred to that area, it was called an independent area, which is really cool because it fit me perfectly. So independent, we weren't part of a zone, we weren't part of a district. We just had our own, it was just me and my companion serving in Gander, Newfoundland, and I loved it. I got a phone call one day from, I can't remember what entity it was, but they asked if we were the religious leaders for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I said, yeah, we are. And we were, because there was no branch president. There was nothing. It was my companion and I and a part member family, a mom and 3 children. That's who we met with. And there was a Holiday Inn in Gander, and we rented a room, a little tiny conference room. We kept a tray there, 2 trays, a bread and a water tray, in a little cabinet that they had for us, and we paid for that place to meet. That was our church, and we were it. We gave the talks, we did the sacrament. One of the young men, one of the sister's children was old enough to have the Aaronic priesthood, so he helped us with the sacrament, and we arranged the talks. We did it all. It was awesome. But I got this phone call, and I can't remember who it was from, and they said, or asked if we were the religious leader. I said, yeah. And they said, we'd like to invite you to a screening of a movie, a documentary about the Holocaust. And I knew a little bit about it, right? This is in the 70s. This is in the 70s, mid 70s. So this is an interesting time, mid to later 70s. My companion didn't feel comfortable going, and I said, hey, we're the representatives, we're going. So we went there, and there were leaders from all kinds of different faiths there. And we had a Catholic priest, I don't know, evangelicals, the Anglican Church. I always liked when I'm not interested, I'm Anglican. You know, they'd always say, that would be equivalent to the Episcopal Church in the United States, but in Canada, it was the Anglican Church, Church of England. Anyway, all these representatives, and we viewed this screening, and the reason why they wanted religious leaders to view it, they wanted to get the input if religious leaders felt like this documentary should go out and publicly, and schools and organizations and be distributed, but they wanted to get the religious leaders' opinion on it before they did that. So we watched this, and I was blown away. The footage, the original footage of the horrific events that took place with the Jews, mostly Jews, during the Holocaust and Nazi Germany, the Nazis. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. We ended up teaching a guy out of that who was a representative of a Pentecostal church, and he wanted to know more about the Mormon faith. And so he came to our meeting one time in our little Holiday Inn, and we went to one of his meetings, and we had a few lessons and discussions. We actually ended up having a really neat discussion with the Catholic father over that area, There was only one Catholic church in Gander at the time. And he was the priest. And we had really awesome conversations. But, it never really led anywhere other than we had a really good relationship where he wasn't bad-mouthing us and we weren't bad-mouthing him. So it was awesome that way. So it was actually really cool to have had that meeting. But when I got home, I'm pretty sure this was the sequence. My memory's not that great when it comes to certain things, but and I think it might have been right after we were married. Sue and I were married. I got a book. I actually got it from my dad's collection. It was a paperback, but it was Inside the Third Reich. And I saw it there one day in Dad's library, and I said, hey, can I take that book and read it? He goes, yeah. So I read this book, Inside the Third Reich. I'm sure it's still available. Fascinating, the things that went on. And I read a few other books. I'm not an expert on this at all. But there's something in me that just went, you know what? I've got to restudy this and bring up the Holocaust and what happened. What happened with a leader in Adolf Hitler that had such an influence to so many people to do so many horrific things, evil things. And I want to do it. I want to do it with my kids, my grandkids, here on this platform, just to remind us of that. There are people they're young people. I don't even think they teach it anymore. It's too offensive probably. I don't know. But roughly 6 million Jews slaughtered, And the other interesting thing is Ukraine, is so much in the news, and the Nazis were so infiltrated in Ukraine, and many of the Ukrainian people were siding with the Nazis and pointing out where the Jews were in Ukraine and participating and wiping them out, the Jews. Ukraine doesn't have this lily white, past, and there's so much corruption and stuff going on, and many of our politicians are involved up to their eyeballs in the corruption in Ukraine. So that's not to excuse Russia and what's going on in there, but we have to look at these things with eyes wide open, and not just pick these sides and just, listen to the narrative on the news and whatnot. But anyway, so I want to bring that up at some point. I really do. It's just been there. I'm almost obsessed with rereading and studying. And then those that hunted down the Nazis after they escaped and went all over, Argentina. And some people think that's all just a myth. That's not a myth. Now, whether Hitler did or not, who knows? I think there's some good evidence, I find it hard that Hitler would kill himself. We have no evidence, the bodies, and Russia's the one that discovered him, and then no proof at all. It seems a little suspect, but we do know there were many Nazis that went to South America. We know that. So that's an interesting aspect of the continuation. Now, in the 70s, when I was on my mission and a teenager, and then in my 20s, this is when a lot of the hunting of the Nazis happened. It's not that long ago. And yeah, they were older, but they were still alive, many of them. And they had some trials, but sometimes these trials are just who were the fall guys in these things. And the real evil guys, knew how to get away and hide. But, so let's remember that, okay? Let's remember what happened let us not forget. Let us not forget, and let us not deny, what happened. I've been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and I feel bad, but it gives me another reason to go to Jerusalem, to Israel. I have not been in the museum there, and I'm just so focused on the biblical side of things that I'm just obsessed with, being where, Jesus was, being where prophets, prophetic things took place, and anything biblical. But next visit, I will go to the museum there. But I've been to the one in Washington, D.C. Sobering. Highly recommend everyone go there. Okay. Just in talking a little bit about the Gospel of John. Now, there are some come follow me's. I'm not going to compete with them. They're so good. And you all have your favorites. You all know which ones you like and feel most comfortable with. I just want to point out a couple of things. Just some things that probably aren't doctrinal as far as, but just more places I've been and seen and felt, and talk about that for just a little bit. So I don't want to get into, I will say this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Now, this is quoted by so many Christians as proof that God and Christ are the same, and of course the Holy Ghost, and they're one God, because God created the earth. Well, and then here we go that Christ created the earth. So then it's the same. This really exposes the latter-day revelation that Jesus Christ is Jehovah of the Old Testament. And this is where we just go like this from other faiths, and why many Christian denominations say we're not Christians, because we don't believe in the Trinity. And those three verses are really the key. I've heard it quoted. I like to say, Sue and I were with a group of evangelicals, the most wonderful people, and Pastor Todd is an amazing person. I look up to him in his knowledge and his testimony of Jesus Christ. And this would be the difference that we have. And it's a big difference. It's a big difference, because the whole purpose, I shouldn't say the whole purpose, one of the main purposes of the restoration was to reveal the nature and character of God and Jesus Christ. The nature and character of God and Jesus Christ, two separate individuals. As soon as we have the first vision, bam, that's revealed. It's so awesome. And so because of that, we have this division with other Christians. And it's so fascinating to me, because so I've taken online classes that originated from Israel, with One for Israel. The professors, amazing. The two courses, amazing. I look at my notes, I love it. It just reminds me so many cool things revealed. But there was one, so these would be Messianic Jews. They're Jewish, converted to Christ, to Christian, but they've adopted the Trinity. And one of the lessons was on it. And I was very bold, and because being online, you're able to interact. And I think there were 20 plus in the class, maybe 30. And I just said, sorry guys, I'm feeling more uncomfortable about this lesson than any others. And it's because of the Trinity. And I said, God and Christ are separate. The scriptures are so adamant about that, especially the New Testament. You have Christ praying to the Father, many acknowledging the Father. He's here to do the Father's will. Well, if you're the same person, you know, and then once you go down that road, everything is kind of confusing. But if you can get it in your head that Christ is Jehovah of the Old Testament, but they're still the Father, they're still God the Father, then everything just clicks. And so anyway, so there's that. And I'm sure lots of people cover it, but I just wanted to point out that those three verses are really the crux of the difference that we have and from other Christian faiths in identifying the Godhead. And for us, we read it and we go, yep, the Word, Jesus Christ, he was in the beginning, and he was with God, and he was God. He was Jehovah. He wasn't Elohim, but he was Jehovah. So good stuff. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is John the Baptist, because John, the beloved, talks about John the Baptist, and this is where we first hear about John the Baptist. Well, it's not where we first hear, but in our Come Follow Me, this is where we start talking about John the Baptist. In verse 27, he it is who coming after me is preferred before me, whose shoes latchet I am not worthy to unloose. These things were done in Bethabara, beyond Jordan, where John was baptizing. So this is an interesting place. From what I understand, Bethabara means something like the place of crossing or the house of crossing, or fording. So it's identified as, when he says beyond Jordan, he'd be on the east side of the Jordan River. So in the country of modern day Jordan now. Now, the river has changed course, and especially over 2,000 years. So the exact location, we wouldn't really know for sure, but we have a pretty good understanding from those that study geology. They can figure where the Dead Sea was larger size 2,000 years ago, and they can see where the Jordan River approximately would have emptied into the Dead Sea. But which, whether it would be in modern day Jordan or whether it would be in Israel, no one really knows. But there is a crossing there now that is the proposed site of where Jesus was baptized. We went there on this last trip. And actually, some of our group members were baptized in the Jordan River, the River Jordan, as you call it in Israel. And it was a cool, it was awesome. We took photos for everybody that were choosing to get baptized. We took the picture. Right across you're as Jordanian, and then the Jordanian police are right there, and on this side is the Israeli, and their police are right there. They're soldiers, and it's pretty cool. And it's not a huge river at that point. Now, a couple of interesting things. We've talked about this before, but I just think it's so significant. Why would John be baptizing there, of all places to be baptizing? John is an interesting character, and he the camel skin, eating locusts and honey in the wilderness. The Judean wilderness is desert. It's not the Bridger Wilderness in Wyoming. It is just desolate. And so John is baptizing there. Here's my thoughts on this. and having been there a couple of times, and actually 3 times, and kind of feeling the spirit of it there, we have some significant things. First off, it's the approximate location where Joshua led the children of Israel into the promised land, is the exact same place. And then which was miraculous, and the crossing was huge. It wasn't just skipping over a little stream. It was a flooded big area, and it was miraculous that they were able to bring in hundreds of thousands of people across that into the promised land. And then not too far is the city of Jericho. Some say one of the oldest, if not the oldest, continuous running city in the world. It's an ancient city. And that's where they went. Well, so you have that. Then you have the baptism of Christ. And why these 2 events in this one location? My personal opinion is very symbolic, and it's because it's the lowest fresh water on earth. It's right before it empties into the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is, I can't remember, something like 1,400 feet below sea level. So as the River Jordan, right before it, so it's still fresh water, and before it empties into the Dead Sea would be the lowest fresh water on earth. And exposed, right? Exposed. And so Christ symbolically is being baptized as he begins his ministry. And he's baptized in the lowest fresh water on earth. In a sense, entering the promised land. He's fulfilling the promises prophesied about him. And Joshua crosses into the promised land, the lowest point, before they can start ascending and realizing the blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Property, priesthood, posterity, right? And so you have to go to the lowest point before you can start up. Christ went to the lowest point. He understood it. He was at the lowest point in the garden, on the cross, and then conquering death, came out of the empty tomb. Or he came out and the tomb is empty. But he had to go low, low, low. And to set the example, to set the metaphor, to set to fulfill prophecy, to descend below us all, is symbolically baptized at the lowest point. And so that's why John was where he was, in my opinion. And all to fulfill prophecy and to prepare the way of the Lord. To prepare the way of the Lord. Baptize him in the lowest point on earth. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this one. You guys are amazing. You're awesome. You're so kind. You're so good. Your questions are awesome. Your comments are amazing. It's just a huge blessing to check in once in a while, share a few things, and then hear the comments. So God bless. Talk to you soon.